Hello everyone! Today we'll dive into the world of classic science fiction. Together with a team of researchers from Earth, we will uncover the darkest secrets of alien simian life. So make yourself comfortable, shut the door to stop the aggressive chimpanzees, and grab a warm drink. Let's get started. The movie begins with Captain Taylor's final report. A spaceship from Earth is preparing to land on a distant planet. The team has already been sailing through the vastness of the universe for 6 months. During this time, about 7 centuries have passed on the astronauts' home planet. Traveling at velocities close to the speed of light distorts the passage of time.
This much is probably true. The men who sent us on this journey are long since dead and gone.
Commander concludes his monologue by saying that he has left the 20th century without any regrets. Finishing his cigar, the hero wonders, will mankind be able to learn from its own mistakes? Or will it continue to wage wars and destroy itself? Afterwards, Taylor gives himself an injection and lies down in a special capsule. The rest of the crew is already sleeping in similar ones. Among them are astronauts Dodge and Landon, as well as Stewart, the only woman on the mission. The calendar reads March 24th, 2673. Taylor closes his eyes and falls into a deep sleep before the last section of the journey. The intergalactic dreams are interrupted by an accident. The shuttle crashes on an unknown planet that looks a lot like Earth. The ship falls into a lake. Nearly all members of the crew wake up.
Stuart.
Immediately after the discovery of the woman's body, water starts gushing into the cabin. The crew decides to abandon the ship. The characters quickly check the atmosphere of the planet for oxygen, collect sensors, an inflatable boat, and a stock of provisions, and then take turns jumping into the water. Taylor is the last to leave the shuttle. Before doing so, he takes a quick glance at the calendar. On it, he sees November 25th, 3978. Outside, the trio board the boat and start rowing toward the nearest shore. All around them is only the surface of the lake and a vast, empty area. The ship gradually sinks to the bottom, to Taylor's dry joke.
Okay, we're here to stay.
Landon voices the main question that worries everyone. He wonders where their expedition has ended up. The commander answers that they are 320 light years away from Earth, on an unnamed planet orbiting a star in the Orion constellation. But Landon doesn't believe him. He knows the captain hasn't had time to look at the ship's data. Taylor dismisses this and says it's time for the squad to go ashore. Together they gather their belongings on a rocky bank, and Dodge takes a soil sample. The astronauts have 72 hours worth of provisions with them. Landon starts aloof at first, but then comes to join his colleagues. He says he can't stop thinking about Stewart and her unfortunate fate. The captain, on the other hand, doesn't seem affected by the loss of a crew member. Taylor coldly remarks that the accident could have been caused by a capsule leak. The commander also notes that the death of their colleague occurred about a year ago, and the crew spent a total of about 18 months in suspended animation. 2,000 years have passed on Earth during this time. At this moment, Dodge receives the data on the soil. It shows that no plants can grow in it. Taylor sets a random direction. No one objects, and the team starts walking. Before departing, Landon places a small American flag in the rocks by the shore. The captain laughs hysterically at the absurdity of the gesture. The squad passes one mountain after another. The heroes walk through day and night. After many hours, they climb under the huge shadow of one of the cliffs, attempting to determine what to do next. Taylor once again recalls that 20 centuries have passed on Earth, and all the travelers' families and friends are dead. He's cynical, but has a sober perception of reality, unlike his friends, who seem to be unable to accept what happened. Dodge is a keen explorer and he leads the group. Taylor is a dreamer, eager to find something better than humanity somewhere in the universe. Landon isn't like them, ready to surrender and die on the sand. Regardless, he continues the journey anyway. Commander teases Landon about his state of shock. The astronauts' water supply is running low, but they decide to keep going nonetheless. Suddenly, Dodge beckons his comrades to come over.
Life.
The astronauts carefully dig out their find and move on. On the 3rd day of their journey, they encounter a new plant, but this time, they don't pay much attention to it. After yet another mountain range, mysterious dark silhouettes begin to follow them. Just before entering the more verdant lands, they also discover mysterious effigies that seem to serve as scarecrows. The group reaches jungles and water. Overjoyed, the trio strips off their clothes and runs for a swim. However, the happiness doesn't last long. On the opposite shore, Landon finds footprints that look similar to humans. When the team turns to head back, they see their clothes and backpacks being dragged away by unknown creatures. The astronauts arrive at the scene too late, grabbing the few things left behind. The heroes follow the creatures and discover a whole pack of real humans. They're picking corn in a nearby field and plucking apples from trees. The savages pay no attention to the travelers.
Well, at least they haven't tried to bite us.
Blessed are the vegetarians.
Taylor immediately spots a pretty girl in the crowd. The natives don't speak and are dressed in primitive rags. Suddenly, a sharp summoning call rings somewhere in the forest. The savages freeze for a few moments and then scatter. The astronauts flee and run into their pursuers. They come at them from several directions, most of them with guns and on horseback. The hunters shoot straight at the humans. At first, it's hard to make out their faces, but then it turns out that the savages are being chased by apes that have become intelligent on this planet. The local humans are caught with snares and nets, shot at and hunted down like a herd of boars. Taylor knocks two of the pursuers off their horses with a deft leap over a snag, but loses sight of his friends. Landon tries to escape from the chase and jumps into a lake from a great height, but this doesn't work. He's captured by the apes nonetheless. Dodge manages to escape from the nets, but they kill him with 2 bullets in the back. Taylor discovers his breathless body and tries to escape, but gets wounded in the neck and falls. The girl he singled out from the crowd is taken prisoner. The captain meets her in the cage when he is put there. The apes scurry around after a successful hunt. Taylor and the other captives are taken to prison. There, the astronaut is administered first aid. The wardens hate humans and consider them dirty, disease-spreading animals. Only Dr. Zira, a local animal psychologist, disagrees with them. An ape named Galen fights for the alien's life. On the bunk next to the commander lies the savage girl. Galen grudgingly says that humans are nothing but filthy animals. The next episode begins with Taylor lying on the floor of his cell. Around him is nothing but metal bars and stiff straw covering the stone ground. A guard blasts the commander with a jet of cold water. People in the neighboring cages extend their hands to the apes, begging for treats. They can't speak. Taylor would love to demonstrate the talent that sets him apart from his primitive counterparts, but his damaged throat doesn't think it's a good idea and refuses to perform its functions. So the astronaut just moves his lips and makes simple gestures. Zira calls him Bright Eyes because of the blue color of his irises. The animal psychologist is delighted and genuinely surprised by the simple fact that Taylor is trying to say something. Apparently, this is the first such case on the planet of the apes. However, Zira's colleague doesn't share her enthusiasm. He believes that the animal is simply repeating what he had seen. Taylor gently beckons Zira over. He sees the notebook and pen in her hands and tries to grab them. For this behavior, the guard hits the astronaut in the ribs with a wooden stick. At that moment, Dr. Zaius arrives at the facility. It becomes apparent that the society of the advanced apes is divided into castes. Gorillas constitute the military and labor force, orangutans the clergy and government officials, and chimpanzees, the most intellectually advanced species, the scientists and explorers. Zira wants to show her find to Zaius, but the orangutan, just like the guard, doesn't share her enthusiasm. He too thinks Taylor is merely trying to mimic the behavior of the talking apes.
Perhaps he understood.
Man has no understanding.
The orangutan doesn't listen to Zira and her arguments. Zaius sees humans as animals who first devour their food supplies in the forest and then plunder the neighboring lands. He's in favor of eliminating all human beings as soon as possible and considers this to be the key to the survival of all apes. Zira decides to move the girl that was captured with Taylor into his cage. The savage examines and sniffs the astronaut. The animal psychologist looks at them with delight. The next scene takes place outside. A huge cage for walks is placed there. Zira meets her fiancé, an archaeologist Cornelius, and leads them to demonstrate Taylor and his abilities. The prisoner is followed all around the cage by his new savage friend. When the animal psychologist and her fiancé find the couple, the captain tries to leave them a message in the sand. At this time, Dr. Zaius approaches them. While the apes are talking, Taylor tries to write words in the sand beneath his feet, to no avail. When his female friend notices this, she accidentally ruins part of the writing. At this point, another savage becomes interested in the sand beneath the captain's feet. Out of anger and despair, the astronaut pushes both of them aside, but the male starts a scuffle with him. The fight is broken up by the guards, threatening Taylor with a torch. They capture him and take him back to the building. Once the skirmish is over, Zaius calls Cornelius over and suggests that they discuss the explorer's upcoming expedition. The ape promises to stop by the doctor's office. When the archaeologist leaves, the gorilla guard asks Zaius, puzzled, what Zira is trying to prove with her research.
That man can be domesticated.
Walking past the spot where Taylor was drawing in the sand, the doctor notices the unfinished letters, but decides to ruin them with his cane. The intelligent ape seems determined not to believe that humans are capable of thought. The captain is locked back in his old cell. Zira walks over to the cage and expresses her regret to Bright Eyes. He nods in understanding at first, but then abruptly grabs the doctor and presses her against the bars. The commander steals a paper and pencil from the psychologist. Taylor immediately retreats to the corner of his cage, but the warden who arrived to the commotion still gives him several blows with a heavy club. He takes back the pencil and paper. Zira puts a collar and a leash on Taylor and takes him to her house to get a better look. Once inside the house, the captain picks up a pen and begins to write his story. But Cornelius thinks that it's all a stunt and humans can't learn to write. In his note, Taylor explains where he learned literacy and tells them about his space journey and his origins. But the apes don't really believe him. The astronaut asks what happened to his last surviving friend. Zira and Cornelius say they don't know where he is. They ask Taylor to elaborate if this is the same man who fell out of the sky with him. The captain replies that they weren't just falling, they were flying. However, the apes once again don't believe him. They sincerely don't understand how anything can float in the air, let alone in space. At that point, the astronaut simply makes a paper airplane and launches it. Cornelius looks at the toy with bewilderment. Next, the protagonist decides to ask for maps of the area. When Cornelius shows him one, Taylor indicates the exact location of his ship. Zira and her fiance calls these lands forbidden and don't believe that it's possible to survive there at all. They also find it unlikely that the captain and his party could walk through the mountains for 3 days before being captured. They are certain that the conditions outside the explored areas are unlivable. Zira thinks that Taylor is living proof of Cornelius's old theory and the missing link in evolution. The archaeologist has been exploring sites outside the ape habitat and has found remains of ancient primates there. He believes that the intelligent apes evolved from them. Cornelius is reluctant to publicly defend his theory and fears he will be accused of hearsay. Zira tries to convince him to try. However, the captain immediately intervenes in the conversation and says that he has nothing to do with their evolution. Zira's fiancé then says that her stance contradicts certain sacred scrolls, the tenets by which the civilization of apes lives, and he refuses to take part in challenging them because he likes stability and is expecting a promotion. Dr. Zaius enters the room with a couple of gorilla guards. He reproaches Cornelius for forgetting about their meeting. Along with the doctor, the local animal commissioner, Maximus, comes in. He is convinced that the animal belongs in a cage. Zira wants to object, but Maximus sends Taylor back to the cell with a muzzle on. At that moment, Zaius notices the paper airplane on the floor. Zira says it's a toy that can fly.
Nonsense.
Taylor is put in a cell with his female friend. 2 gorillas approach the cage and want to take the commander away for castration. Even the warden's assurance that Zira wants to mate the 2 and will be terribly upset have no effect. The order has been given by Dr. Zaius personally. When the ape enters the cage, the commander waits for him to come closer, snatches the guard's baton, and stuns him. Next, he attempts to escape on his own. Taylor scares passersby and finds himself in a local church. There, he carefully sneaks along the decorative fences to avoid being seen by the preacher. Inside, a funeral is taking place. The captain is spotted by a baby ape, and it points at the human. The protagonist flees, deftly evading riders, breaking out of nets, and making his way through the marketplace. The chase continues at the local museum. The exhibition there consists entirely of stuffed human savages. Among them is Dodge. Taylor runs out into the street and almost gets caught by a rider. Then the locals join the chase, pelting the commander with anything they can find. Together with them, the guards drive the astronaut into a net, but Zira comes to him in time. The ape wants to hand the captain over to the security service, as suddenly,
Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
After the incident, Taylor is sent back to his cell with his lady. He names the savage Nova. The nice conversation, or more like the commander's monologue, is interrupted by the guards. They douse the prisoners with cold water from a hose. While Taylor is distracted by the stream, they take Nova away and put her in a neighboring cage. Through the bars, Taylor looks at his chosen one and says that he misses her. He thinks about Stuart. and says that she was destined to be the new Eve. Then the hero points out that even though Nova isn't as smart as his former colleague, there's no other choice. He gives the girl a smile. The savage was listening to him with a mixture of anxiety and confusion on her face. But now, she tries to copy Taylor's smile. He notices this and is amazed. At this time, the gorillas enter the prison. They put a leash on the astronaut and take him away. Nova reaches out of her cage and holds out her hands to the commander. Taylor is brought to a room that resembles a courtroom. The gorillas prepare him for the hearing. Following them, Zira and Cornelius enter the room. They inform the captain that there is some sort of hearing awaiting him. 3 orangutans then enter and take the judges' seats. These are the president of the academy, the animal commissioner, Maximus, and the representative of science and faith, Dr. Zaius. The prosecutor is Dr. Honoris. Taylor is stripped of all of his clothes because the president thinks they give off a horrible stench. Honoris is about to begin his speech, but is interrupted by Zira and Cornelius. They want them to at least tell the defendant what he's being tried for. The court objects because it considers Taylor an animal who doesn't have any rights under ape law. Zira tries to argue that the astronaut is not just an ordinary savage, but a living being capable of thought. She also finds out why Taylor was summoned. Zaius says that they plan to get rid of him, and the pair of chimpanzees were simply given a chance to explain themselves for everything the astronaut has done. They're threatened with repercussions should they continue to defend him. At that point, the captain says he'll defend himself, whereupon he gets brutally silenced by 2 guards. Honoris accuses Zira and her fiancé of straying from the tenets of the ape religion and cynically studying humans. He also wants to punish Galen, the surgeon who operated on Taylor. The court prosecutor believes that the psychologist and the physician deliberately created a talking monster out of a wild animal through experiments.
That's a lie.
Mind your tongue, madam.
Did we create his mind as well?
Honoris decides to prove Taylor's lack of intelligence. He conducts a test, but the questions concern the tenets of the ape faith, which the astronaut, of course, doesn't know. For example, the prosecutor asks why the humans have no souls. The commander agrees that he is not well versed in their culture and is not afraid to admit it, but the committee is not particularly inclined to listen to him. Then the hero writes a statement on a sheet of paper and asks them to read it out loud. Cornelius voices the written text. It says that Taylor is an alien from another planet. Zaius thinks that this is just a bad joke and suggests finding Landon, another supposedly intelligent human. The procession goes out into the courtyard, where all the savages caught during the raid are located. Among them, Taylor recognizes his friend. However, the guy stays silent and acts strange. The astronaut realizes that Zaius is behind the brain surgery on his friend. Taylor tries to attack him, but is seized by the gorilla guards and taken back to the courtroom. There, the orangutan explains himself to the committee and says that Landon suffered skull damage during the raid, and the animal surgeons helped keep him alive. Taylor retaliates by accusing him of committing a crime and saying that Zaius wants to do the same thing to him. The gorillas then shut him up again. At this point, Cornelius intervenes in the conversation. He says that the captain did indeed come from the Forbidden Zone and described it in detail. The archaeologist can confirm his testimony because he conducted excavations in these lands. The court notes that the authorization under which Cornelius had acted was revoked because he exceeded his authority, but the scientist replies that he had already found the remains of ancient primitives by the time his explorations were discontinued. Their age exceeds that of the ancient scrolls, the key compendium of the ape's tenets. At this point, Honoris jumps up from his seat and says that what he said is irrelevant. Zaius, however, allows the defense to continue. But once Zira begins to make her argument that humans, in theory, can be intelligent and able to speak, the judges make the famous 3 monkeys pose.
Objection! Sustain!
Sustain all objections, but face the truth.
Honoris announces that the state's indictment of Zira and Cornelius for contempt of court, malicious plans, and scientific hearsay. The tribunal promises to examine all evidence, render a verdict, and afterward determine Taylor's fate. The protagonist is taken by gorillas and led away to Zaius' office. Zaius tells Taylor that his chimp friends have been released on bail, but will soon be tried for hearsay. The tribunal has put Zaius in charge of the humans. The cunning ape plans to first castrate the test subject and then study his brain, as he did with Landon. But the villain is willing to grant a reprieve if Taylor reveals who he is and why he has arrived here. The commander replies that he already told them everything at the trial, but Zaius doesn't believe him and asks where his tribe lives. At that point, the astronaut says that creatures like him live on a different planet, but Zaius refuses to trust the human. Taylor, however, catches him off guard by saying that the orangutan must not believe the prosecutor since he's asking such questions. Zaius replies that he's right, and he thinks that Taylor is a mutant, not a man-made monster. The hero replies that Zira and Cornelius had a similar theory about him, which means that Zaius supports heresy. The orangutan continues the interrogation, but now calling Taylor by name. During the conversation, Zaius tells him that the eastern part of the desert, where the astronaut came from, is considered uninhabitable by the apes. That's why it's never been explored. Zaius tries to find out if there is a jungle beyond the forbidden zone where Taylor came from, but the astronaut answers honestly that he doesn't know. At this point, Zaius calls him a menace and then promises to find out the answers to his questions through surgery in 6 hours. Taylor is taken to his cage. A young ape named Lucius enters the prison. He says that Taylor is being transferred to the zoo and introduces himself as a member of the Ministry of Animal Rights. The warden doesn't particularly trust him because it's already late into the night, so the visitor gives him the written order. The gorilla immediately realizes that the paper is fake because it doesn't have Dr. Zaius' signature on it.
Grab him!
When the warden is knocked out, the young ape frees the astronaut from the cage, but the hero insists on taking Nova with him. Together, they get into a carriage and begin the journey to the edge of the forbidden zone. Zira is driving. The journey passes without any accidents. At the destination, the group is met by Cornelius and his horses. Taylor immediately picks up a weapon and removes his leash. The archaeologist suggests they go to the site of his past excavations. The group takes a break at the border of the forbidden zone. Cornelius tells them that the taboo against visiting these places is ancient. Everyone just accepts it for granted, and nobody remembers why it's forbidden to go to these lands. The archaeologist proposes to proceed to the seashore, where the scientists' old camp is located. The party mounts their horses, packs the supplies, and abandons the carriage. Later that day, the group reaches the camp. The captain suggests Cornelius show them the excavation and findings. The group enters the cave through the scaffolding. Zira spots pursuers. Taylor and Lucius draw their rifles. The captain immediately fires a warning shot at the snipers on the mountain and points the gun at Zaius. The latter has arrived accompanied by a squad of armed guerrillas. The astronaut forces the orangutan and his men to pull back. Zaius threatens Cornelius and Zira with the gallows for treason unless they agree to serve 2 years for heresy. The archaeologist says he wants to find out the truth and suggests that the orangutan follow him into the cave to see the scientists' findings. Zaius says that if the fossils prove that something older than the ape's faith exists, he'll let Zira and Cornelius go. Lucius stays behind to guard the camp. Inside the cave, Cornelius demonstrates his findings: arrowheads and other items from ancient primates that date back 13 centuries. But then he pulls open a cover under which lie even more ancient artifacts, 700 years older than the earliest discovered fossil. And the most interesting thing about them is that among the finds are rather sophisticated tools. Zaius tries to argue that all of this can be disputed. In response, Zira holds out a doll and says that humans made it themselves because there were no ape bones near their remains. Zaius doesn't believe her and continues to appeal to the ancient scrolls and the fact that primates once tried to keep humans in their houses, but then decided they couldn't be domesticated. Taylor, meanwhile, is sorting through the rest of their findings. Among them are eyeglasses and a prosthetic heart valve. Based on this, the commander makes a logical conclusion: humans have been here before apes, and their technology may well have surpassed that of the primates. Zaius tries to argue against this as well, but at that moment, gunshots ring out from outside. Lucius struggles against one of the attacking gorillas and fires into the air. Taylor starts shooting. Nova runs away from him and hides with the chimpanzees. The captain then lures Zaius out of the cave and takes him hostage. The orangutan commands his men to stand back, and the commander sends Lucius to the gorillas demanding a ransom. He asks for a horse and provisions to continue his journey along the sea. Taylor ties up Zaius. The chimpanzees ask to release the leader of their faith, but the captain remains adamant. He accuses the doctor of fanatical adherence to dogmas. In response, Zaius asks Cornelius to read a verse from the ancient scrolls. It says that man is but a servant of the devil who kills for sport or amusement.
Shun him. Drive him back into his jungle lair, for he is the harbinger of death.
Taylor listens to him in silence. At that moment, the gorillas arrive at the camp. The chimpanzees refuse to follow the humans because they believe that their innocence has been proven, so the astronaut says goodbye. takes Nova with him and mounts his horse. He kisses Zira in parting. At the last moment, he warns Zaius against pursuit. The doctor replies that he's always known of man's true nature and awaited his arrival with fear. Taylor leaves to find answers about this planet and the life on it. The chimpanzees untie the orangutan. The gorillas want to rush in pursuit, but Zaius stops them. Instead, he orders the cave entrance to be blown up to hide evidence of the researchers' innocence. Zaius threatens Zira and Cornelius with trial for heresy. Lucius tries to reproach him for slowing down progress, but the doctor is convinced that he is saving the future by doing so. The couple on horseback, meanwhile, is riding farther and farther away. At sunset, they see an unexpected and frightening picture. Taylor falls to his knees and curses humanity for its thirst for self-destruction. Interestingly, the movie was shot on a very limited budget. That's why the apes were so vastly different in their progress from the humans of the 60s. Although initially, they were going to be more advanced, the apes' lifestyle was reverted almost to the Stone Age because of the high cost of production. The cost-saving efforts, however, did not affect the high quality of the prosthetic makeup. It was done by a real plastic surgeon who reconstructed the faces of wounded World War II soldiers. As always, we left the name of the movie in the description of the video. Don't forget to give this video a like and click on the bell icon to make sure you're the first to learn about a new video. And finally, let us know in the comments, what other movies about apes do you know?